I are going to indulge in an all-night orgy of sex and violence. First, we're going to have sex with the headless corpse of the Virgin astronaut.
I have never seen a video nasty. I wouldn't. I have far too much.
But how can you judge on a video nasty? You've never seen one.
Look, if somebody tells me, as we get these reports in from Europe, from America, and from this country, that a particular video nasty contains that, and that, I actually don't need to see visually what I know is in that film.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Catch my horror taxi. I fell in love with a video nasty.
1980 was a busy year in the UK. Margaret Thatcher and the miners were at loggerheads. The Yorkshire Ripper was frequent front-page news. Unemployment was at a 2-year high. Michael Jackson, Blondie and Bowie were in the charts, and Alton Towers opened its gates for the first time. Up until now, movie fans could watch the latest releases at their nearby cinema. An innocent time before reclining seats and warnings telling you how to behave. But after a film's initial run, that was usually it. It was gone for good. Maybe there would be a network premiere on BBC One or ITV, but it would probably be a pan and scan job and most likely missing the swears. But on the high street, a new electronic device was starting to revolutionize how we watch movies. It was the video cassette recorder, the VCR. It was expensive and it weighed a ton. On it, you could watch video cassettes, full movies. Sometimes they had trailers, and you could pause, rewind and fast forward to your heart's content. At least until a vigorously aggressive rewind decided to knacker up the tape. This was the true start of home viewing. Physical media, which was yours. It belonged to you. You didn't have to wait until it turned up on TV. You could grab it from the shelf and watch it morning, noon and night. It was awesome. And the one true blessing of home video, for an all too brief amount of time, was freedom. The British Board of Film Censors, later the British Board of Film Classification, had since 1912 been the governing body vetting motion pictures for cinema. A variety of certificates were applied to films depending on their content, with sex, violence and swearing being the most common deciding factors. But the home video system, or VHS, was a budding technology. It was new, different, and nobody had been appointed to help keep it in line. For a few very special years, the floodgates were open. Movie fans were tantalized with the kind of material that wouldn't stand a chance of being approved by a censor. Some were uncut versions of films that had previously been trimmed for cinema. Others were movies that hadn't even been released. A select few were titles the BBFC had refused to certify at all. And here they were, uncut, and in your living room. And therein lied the freedom. Freedom of choice. Nobody telling you what you could or couldn't watch. Horror fans could sit on the sofa with Gran and enjoy a full, uncensored version of Cannibal Ferox, I Spit on Your Grave, or The Last House on the Left. They became known as video nasties. Boundary-pushing obscurities which had little or no chance of coming to a cinema screen near you, much less than anything resembling their original, uncut form. The protocols applied to theatrical movies for decades fell through their cracks. VHS was new ground and the rating system didn't yet apply. Movie fans were loving it. In the living room, away from the popcorn munchers, a Friday night showcase of zombie flesh eaters and women behind bars were no big deal. No need for a fuss. The world, most certainly, did not come to an end. Unfortunately, the lack of any notable restrictions on VHS soon would. At the dizzying heights of video nasty euphoria, full-page spreads for The Driller Killer boasted a drill bit boring into a homeless man's brain pan. One for SS Experiment Camp showcased a mostly naked female prisoner of war strung upside down on a fence post. Both ads promised goodies far more gruesome and salacious than anything either of the films provided. But as a come-on for horror enthusiasts, they worked a treat. And it was this kind of marketing that would attract precisely the wrong kind of attention. Public figures and politicians were beginning to notice. Campaigns were launched, loud debates on video violence were vented on TV, the tabloid press joined in with ear-splitting predictability, and the days of renting Faces of Death from your nearest VHS independent shop were suddenly numbered. 72 video nasties were rounded up in list form by the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the Obscene Publications Act from 1959 became the acid test for video titles considered particularly problematic. 39 were found to be obscene, including Tenebrae and The House by the Cemetery, titles which had been released to video in the very same censored versions as approved by the BBFC for screenings in UK cinemas. The remaining 33, which included such run-of-the-mill hokum as Frozen Scream and Unhinged, were dropped from the list when prosecutions proved unsuccessful. So let's take a look back at the true video nasties. The 39 hot potatoes which started all the fuss and were officially found to be obscene. A bizarre era in British history when unconvincing special effects could actually get a horror film prosecuted. Some are surprisingly well known, others are absolute junk. But the question is, are they nasty? You be the judge.
Research is taking place and it will show that these films not only affect young people, but I believe they affect adults as well.
Absurd.
Absurd was a 1981 horror sequel of sorts from Joe D'Amato, the Italian director famous for his collaborations with Laura Gemser, a series of explicit Emmanuel spins, which won up the Sylvia Christel franchise to a whole new level of art. A towering bearded assailant, whose magical healing abilities render him being disemboweled on offense a minor inconvenience, stalks bikers, janitors and babysitters with a Loomis-like priest in his shadow. There is zero sleaze to be garnered from this one, surprising given the director's filmography, but the violence is at a level which saw just over 2.5 minutes of gore trimmed from the UK cinema version in 1983. 2 versions were released by Medusa Video in the unclassified years, both with identical cover art boasting a gigantic axe splattered with blood. One version was uncut, the other missing even more than the version released in cinemas. Both versions were removed by stockists when the video classification stepped in to ruin the fun. In 2016, 88 films successfully got observed approved as uncut for home viewing, complete with nostalgic cover art harking back to the pre-cert VHS.
The Anthropophagus Beast.
The Anthropophagus Beast has become something of a cult, a semi-predecessor to Absurd. The focus here shifts to a Greek island, where a host of video nasty regulars are stalked and slayed by a marauding cannibal with an insatiable taste for tourists. Known in the States as the Grim Reaper, most of the gore is backloaded into the final half hour, meaning the powers that be had to sit through an hour of tedium before they reached anything worth banning. 2 versions were released in the early days of the UK video, an uncut version from Video Film Productions, and a heavily cut edition from Video Shack, which not only removed most of the gore but also toned down the monster's bloody face on the front cover. A no-frills DVD surfaced in 2002 as The Grim Reaper, but unfortunately contained an import version already watered down. Come 2015, the beast's evil doings were finally forgiven, each and every death scene now restored to its uncut glory. Axe was a micro-budget oddity from 1974 with a running time which stretched, even in its uncut version, to barely over an hour. Here, 3 criminals with a preference for intimidating supermarket staff hide out in a remote farmhouse, only to have their criminal ambitions quashed by the silent but deadly female resident there, who looks after her disabled grandfather. The film was approved for cinemas in the censored version under the Old X certificate, bearing the nastier sounding title of California Axe Massacre. But the video from VRO reinstated violence and gore the theatrical version had previously denied. This, together with another imposing axe laid bare on the front cover, sealed this one's fate as perhaps the shortest of all video nasties.
Axe will slash out and shock you beyond anything before. Axe.
Bloodbath.
Bloodbath from the acclaimed Italian director Mario Bava brought a touch of class to the annals of video nasty lore, more commonly known as Twitch of the Death Nerve. This 1971 classic, which saw a cleaver-wielding psycho dispatching inheritance chasers on a posh lakeside estate. became in all but name the template for an entire generation of slasher movies to come. Unfortunately, this legacy didn't hold water in the UK when it was routinely banned from cinemas as A Bay of Blood in 1972. The uncut VHS version from Hokushin was likely popular, but the title, combined with 2 blood-caked machetes on the video cover, were certain contenders for getting this one banned. The gore in Bloodbath is no stronger than your average Friday the 13th, but even Jason's mother found herself, to a less severe degree, netted by the video nasty cull when the uncut version of her debut hit UK VHS completely uncut.
The Beast in Heat.
The Beast in Heat was an acquired taste. The pre-certificate VHS art from JVI at least told you what you were getting, I'll bet, with an exaggerated version of the eponymous antagonist on the front cover. Set towards the end of World War II, this 1977 shocker was a patchwork of old grainy war footage, lengthy snippets from one of the director's previous films, and new footage of a female SS doctor who loves nothing more than submitting her unwilling captors to all manners of horrors. Equal nudity opportunities apply in this one, whether male or female, along with syrupy looking blood and guinea pigs daubed in paint to make them look like flesh-eating rats. Sal Boris, who passed away around the same time as the video nasty saga was in full swing, plays the title character with alarming gusto, housed by an evil doctor in a big cage with rubbery looking bars. No distributor has ever been brave enough to submit The Beast in Heat for UK release, either theatrically or on video, a fact that has seen the film languish in uncertified limbo for almost 50 years.
Blood Feast.
Blood Feast is easily the oldest of the Video Nasty Top 39, a 1963 semi-classic which sees a deranged caretaker collecting body parts from a string of unwilling female victims. His ambition to use them in an ancient ceremony capable of reviving an Egyptian goddess is the stuff of comic books. The fake-looking gore, generously supplied and occasionally pretty disgusting, is the stuff of nightmares. The movie, with its severed limbs and extracted tongues, was something of a trendsetter in the terms of gratuitous gore, but was already quite dated by the time the video nasty scandal hit. The uncut Astra video cover screamed, "Nothing so appalling in the annals of horror." Appalling it certainly was, and into the bottomless pit of the band it went.
Blood Rights.
Blood Rights, an obscure example of a micro-budget horror from 1968, was directed by Andy Milligan, and fans of the farthest reaches of B-movie weirdness will know exactly what that means. Playing like a less interesting version of Mario Bava's Bloodbath, the film, known in North America as The Ghastly Ones, sees a sextet of inheritance seekers bumped off one by one in a Victorian mansion. And they just made good with what they had. Moviegoers who prefer their cinema well-made and logical need not apply. The film is so full of technical kinks and hiccups, you'd be forgiven for thinking the budget ran out halfway through and they just made good with what they had. Production noise can occasionally be heard on the soundtrack, along with the director politely instructing the actors. On the plus side, Scorpio Video wowed its audience with not only an uncensored print, but one of the first known examples of a reversible VHS cover, offering viewers the chance to choose which artwork they preferred.
Bloody Moon.
Bloody Moon had such charm. With Jess Franco at the helm, how could it not? A prolific Spanish director with over 200 projects to his name. The man gave the UK no less than 6 video nasties. Their nasty status varied, the quality not so much. Bloody Moon was one of the best. The disco-tapping saga of a killer in a Mickey Mouse mask stalking prey at a Spanish-language school for girls. Slasher movies were in surprisingly short supply outside of the US, a horror offshoot which could have proved popular in Europe given half the chance. Franco gave it his best shot with this one, but the special makeup effects often let us down. The trailer title unwisely freeze-framing on arguably the worst effect in the film, Animal lovers also had a reason to be offended, as a snake is the one deprived of its head, the camera zooming in to witness its final breath. Interlight Video released 2 versions to VHS, one in line with the censored cinema version, the other fully uncut with all the gore restored. Punters lucky enough to find an early edition would also have found a hidden gift, a glossy full-colour poster hidden behind the sleeve.
Bloody Moon, ein Film, den du so schnell nicht vergisst. Bloody Moon.
The Burning. The Burning is decidedly mainstream for an official video nasty. It was 1981 slasher goodness at its finest. Charming characters, rousing ambience by Rick Wakeman, and a menagerie of woefully icky makeup effects from Tom Savini. Based loosely on the urban legend of a woodland-dwelling serial killer, the movie's weapon of choice was a pair of household garden shears. Used for anything but pruning after an extravagant campsite prank goes hideously wrong. The Burning was given the all-clear for UK cinemas with surprisingly minimal cuts. Thorn EMI then released it in the early days of VHS without so much as a tweak. Holly Hunter pops in for a scene or two. When the controversy started to take hold, video stockists were invited to return the uncut tape and have a censored, date-stamped example sent out in its place. Both editions soon vanished from shelves, and it took nearly 2 decades for the UK to see an officially certified release of The Burning in all its gory glory.
The Burning.
Cannibal Apocalypse.
Cannibal Apocalypse sees us back in Italy, or rather Atlanta, USA, with a trio of cannibalistic veterans on the loose and thirsty for blood. It all starts in Vietnam, with an apparently innocent bite to the arm. John Saxon of Enter the Dragon is the unlucky recipient, who, before long, has hunger pains for flesh of the human kind. Antonio Margaretti's 1980 shocker skipped theatrical in the UK, so VHS was its only chance. Released as it was by Replay Video, uncensored and with a XX rating, which wasn't even a thing. The word cannibal was a magnet to all the things video nasty, with an abnormally high 8 titles containing it spread over various lists. In the early days of video classification, the BBFC did draw up a cuts list for Cannibal Apocalypse, with a view to it being released as an officially certified 18. Unfortunately, in spite of the film missing most of its gore, including a prolonged attack on a mechanic's leg with an angle grinder, the VHS re-release never saw the light of day. It did resurface years later on DVD, the only casualty a blink and you'll miss it shot of a rat inadvertently being set alight.
Cannibal Ferox.
Cannibal Ferox was everything you'd expect from a video nasty and more. Gratuitous boobage, mistreatment of the local wildlife, and a never-ending spiral of completely gratuitous gore, all set against a beautiful Amazonian backdrop, which the movie rarely bothers to take advantage of. In this one, a group of grossly unprepared college students venture deep into the jungle to dispel rumours that cannibalism still exists. Within maybe 20 minutes of their jeep submerging in the mud, they realise their investigations are unlikely to bear fruit. Replay Video released this one completely intact, with the same mythical XX rating they gifted Cannibal Apocalypse. Perhaps predicting the issues that gory VHS covers would soon provoke, the company declined to illustrate the front cover in order to avoid offence. Unfortunately, busybodies could simply flip to the back cover in order to be offended, and Cannibal Ferox became one of the core titles during the bans. As with Cannibal Apocalypse, the BBFC did approve a heavily cut version of Cannibal Ferox when the controversy was in full flow. This time it did get released by the very same company who had previously released the uncut version. The graphic images on the back cover were toned down, a pile of human bones was added to the front, and a gigantic 18 certificate made no bones about the fact that we were getting an officially approved version. Both versions, even the one missing over 6 minutes of material, were found to be obscene.
Cannibal Holocaust.
Cannibal Holocaust, with its unforgettable artwork showcasing a native merrily feasting on a string of exposed intestines, was an experience unsuspecting VHS addicts wouldn't soon forget. The promotion was eye-catching and lurid to reel in the horror fans, but ended up attracting the wrong kind of attention. A group of ruthless, thrill-hungry documentary makers wind up killed and digested in the depths of the Amazon, only for their film cans to be later discovered by a professor who used them alongside TV executives in New York. Cannibal Holocaust was a found footage prototype, far more effective than the shot-on-video pretenders that would slowly follow decades later. Director Rogerio Diatto had to prove in court he hadn't actually killed his cast, and the film's treatment of animals remains a hot topic to this day. Contrary to popular belief, the Go Video VHS, which came under fire in the UK, was considerably far from uncut, missing most of the gore which got the film hauled over the coals even in its home country. The famous image of the tribal girl impaled on a spike was barely hinted at in the pre-cert version, awkwardly trimmed and rejigged to avoid getting too close. Even stripped of about 7 minutes of material, Cannibal Holocaust became one of the most condemned titles of the video nasty era. Sturdy proof that it was often the titles and graphic cover art rather than the movie's content that gave rise to much of the fuss. 4 decades on, and Cannibal Holocaust is now nearly, but not quite, uncensored in the UK, missing a moment involving a raccoon-like animal that will never likely be passed.
The Cannibal Man.
The Cannibal Man, a Spanish production from 1972, doesn't take place in the Amazon. It's not even about cannibalism, but its title contained the C word, so it's probably all that was needed. A slaughterhouse worker inadvertently kills a man, snowballing into a chain of killings as he goes to extreme lengths to conceal his original crime. More a psychological drama than outright horror. The gore is scarce and far between. A bloody opening sequence in a slaughterhouse, which unsuspecting viewers would have witnessed first, may well have caused a ruckus, along with the meat cleaver and exposed bosoms laid bare on the back cover. Rumours of longer versions of The Cannibal Man persist, but its mildness is illustrated by the fact it was cut by a mere 3 seconds when later approved as an 18.
The Devil Hunter.
The Devil Hunter reunites us with the divine magic of Jess Franco, his stab at the cannibal genre providing exactly what you'd expect. Video nasty regular Al Cleaver is our mustachioed hero. Indiana Jones before Indy was a thing, but instead of seeking the Ark of the Covenant, our hero here battles a nemesis with ping pong balls for eyes whose junk, notably during the final fight sequence, dangles footloose and fancy free. The plot, in inverted commas, sees a Vietnam veteran descend into a cannibal-infested jungle to rescue a blonde model who is being held against her will. Special effects peak in a moment that sees our protagonist climb a steep rock face, which was achieved by the actor crawling along the ground while the camera is tilted sideways. Cine Hollywood released this classic in the early days of video in a shortened version with the artwork that made it look like an action-adventure. It was later, much later, passed as an 18 uncut.
Don't Go in the Woods.
Don't Go in the Woods sees the true video nasties reach their creative nadir, a 1981 slash opus so devoid of chills, so unremittingly awful, that it boggles the mind as to how anyone ever deemed it obscene. A deranged killer is on the prowl in the sun-kissed woodlands of Utah, and his costume looks like it was rescued from a skip. The movie takes place almost entirely in broad daylight. The dialogue sounds post-synced and the death scenes are choppily assembled, leaving even the most undiscriminating gore fans likely to be disappointed. Marketed in some countries as the sequel to Don Jones's The Forest, which makes zero sense given that one stemmed from 1982, Don't Go in the Woods was so tame and inexplicit it was passed uncut as a 15 decades later in 2007.
The Driller Killer.
The Driller Killer was a masterstroke of marketing. What true horror fan couldn't pass on such a provocative title? Full-page spreads implied a gore-fest of astronomical proportions, an unexpectation rapidly crushed with a single viewing of the film. The notorious 1979 shocker, which politely requested in its opening scene that audience play the movie loud, owed more to Polanski's repulsion than a power tool carnage horror fans came to know and love, with the occasional spillage of claret thrown in to ensure they didn't feel shortchanged. Aside from one inconsequential scene, Vipco's VHS was completely untainted and helped unwittingly kickstart the whole video nasty cull. Wizard Video, who also distributed the movie in the States, also released a slipcase pre-cert version in PAL. The BBFC did view the film in the early 80s, and the general consensus was that it could be certified with cuts. But by this point, the Driller Killer, for all its artistry and unexpected subtlety, had been officially deemed obscene and subsequently disappeared without trace. As with many of the original video nasties, the film was, years later, green-stamped as an 18 certificate, completely uncut.
The Driller Killer is coming.
Evil Speak.
Evil Speak is run-of-the-mill and mainstream by video nasty standards. It saw a young Clint Howard incessantly bullied by a group of louts at a military school for boys. They taunt him, emulate him, even kill his beloved puppy, enough to drive anyone to Carrie-esque levels of rage. In a demonic twist, he employs a computer to unleash an army of demonic pigs eager to do the devil's bidding. Videospace released Evil Speak in the early days, fully uncut on VHS, though rumours persist of a stronger version before the movie was granted an R rating in the States. A censored edition surfaced when it became evident gruesome horror videos were getting in trouble, and both videos were pulled when the Video Recordings Act took effect. When the movie was later approved as an 18, massive cuts were applied not only to the gore, but also to the finer details of the black magic ceremony Clint conducts in the basement. Censorship arguably more bizarre than anything that takes place in the film.
Evil Speak. Remember that little kid you used to pick on? Well, he's a big boy now.
Expose.
Expose, known stateside as The House on Straw Hill, holds bragging rights for being the only British film in the Video Nasty Top 39. Udo Kier plays a writer besieged by nightmares whilst torn between the buxom housekeeper and a blonde secretary he hires to type up his book. There's a lot of straw dogs and a touch of psycho, and not a great deal of substance in between. It was passed with moderate cuts for cinemas under the X rating in the mid-70s, but Intervision's very early video release, housed in a cardboard gatefold carton fancy enough to make collectors drool, was totally uncut. Even in the full version, a shower slashing is bloody but brief, and a scene in which the secretary is assaulted in a wheat field far less graphic and prolonged than the ordeal suffered by Susan George's character in Straw Dogs. A video released uncut during the same era which never even came close to being doomed as a video nasty.
Faces of Death.
Faces of Death, a notoriously grim documentary which had its fair share of controversy even in the States, was the stuff of legend back in 1978. A horrifying curio spoken about in hushed tones, an initiation rite for birthday parties for those with stomachs of steel. And here it was, in the UK, a country which in 1980 had banned Derek and Clive Get the Horn, a bespectacled doctor, actually actor Michael Carr, who starred in a slew of old westerns, takes us on a downbeat journey exploring the many faces of death. From grainy old war footage to animal attacks and more, we visit ancient tombs, a selection of abattoirs, and see the ghastly horrors of post-mortems up close. Some of it is real, much of it is fake, and it all ends on an unexpectedly cheery note. Distributors Atlantis took a leap of faith, releasing Faces of Death not only with a gruesome cover, but also a footnote that many of the scenes contained herein would not pass the British Board of Film Censors. And they were right, especially during a period when horror movies as tame as The Hills Have Eyes were being cut. It was a bold statement, and one which could only encourage do-gooders that something needed to be done. They needn't have worried, since the pre-cert VHS of Faces of Death was shorn of around 30 minutes of material, one substantial chunk yanked out somewhere in its middle, most likely to fit the movie on shorter cassettes than anything to do with censorship. Faces of Death was so heavily truncated that the ill-fated fellow being electrocuted on the front cover was no longer anywhere to be seen in the film.
If you have never thought about death, it's time you started thinking. Faces of Death, now a major motion picture.
Fight for Your Life.
Fight for Your Life, also known as Staying Alive, was no PG-rated dance extravaganza. It was pure, unabashed 70s groundhouse fodder. and would never get past first base today. 3 convicts escape from a prison van, torment staff at a local liqueur store, and then hide out in the Black Minister's family home. The leader, played by William Sanderson, who would later star in Blade Runner and 2 films named Last Man Standing, has a low tolerance stemming from something which happened to him as a boy, and a variety of horrors and decidedly non-PC insults ensue. The film was rejected for UK cinemas in 1981 due to its numerous scenes of racially motivated violence. But distributors Vision On released it to pre-certificate VHS completely uncut. Not nearly as graphic as its reputation would imply, Fight for Your Life had a selection of trailers in the States to appeal to different audiences, and would likely pass uncut in the UK today if only a distributor would pick it up.
A story filled with unbelievable action, a movie of excruciating violence, a saga of extraordinary courage that will leave you cheering. Fight for your life. Experience it soon, here.
Flesh for Frankenstein. Flesh for Frankenstein delivered a rare glimmer of horror comedy to the video nasties. About as bloody and twisted as the classic horror story ever got. Udo Kier plays the notorious Baron. His gruesome experiment here, the ultimate zombie couple, but his demented plans are fraught with complication from the start. Branded as Andy Warhol's Frankenstein in some circles, the late artist reputedly had little direct involvement, and the 1973 shocker was heavily cut for not 1 but 2 glorious runs in UK cinemas. The pre-certificate era brought us just as many releases on VHS, a censored version from Vipco and a fully uncut alternative from Video Gems. It took until 2006 for Flesh for Frankenstein to be officially granted uncut status in the UK, the Bowen's strikingly kinky escapades finally restored in full.
Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, the goriest, sexiest, and wildest Frankenstein ever filmed.
Forest of Fear. Forest of Fear is rarely discussed or even heard of, and is a micro-budget 1980 zombie film more commonly identified as Toxic Zombies. A group of unfortunate hippies are poisoned by chemicals sprayed over their naughty plants in the woods. Before long, deranged zombies hungry for death and dismemberment are on the loose in rural Pennsylvania. John Amplas, who played Martin in George Romero's vampire classic of the same name, pops in to say hi. The effects are cheap. The VHS cover from Mondo Video, for some reason designed on a sheet of graph paper, apparently even cheaper. And Forest of Fear is most assuredly no Dawn of the Dead.
The Blood Eaters, rated R.
Gestapo's Last Orgy. Gestapo's Last Orgy was a 1977 Italian production with content every bit as subtle as its title. An SS experiment camp for the classier, more perceptive viewer. It opened with a quote from Nietzsche and threatens the audience with an actual story. The survivor of a concentration camp returns to the abandoned site, along with the commandant responsible for much of her trauma. In flashback, we witness the horrors that took place there years before, as her tormentor tried unsuccessfully to break her spirit and will. Not to be outdone, the film was retitled Caligula Reincarnated as Hitler in the States, and had a brief moment of pixelization in one of its most graphic scenes. VFP were the brave souls that released this during the early years of UK VHS. A gigantic swastika on the front cover and a massive warning on the back. Another release from the same company bore the same artwork but had a sticker with less vibrant description crudely pasted on. Video Shack followed up with a cut version a little later, now super rare and perhaps the most valuable pre-certificate video ever released. The House by the Cemetery. The House by the Cemetery was where stylish Italian horror and exploitation gore graciously met. A 1981 zombie classic which saw a couple and their young son move into a New England home. Blissfully unaware there's an uninvited tenant lurking in the cellar. Fans of the comparatively refined Amityville horror may find the level of horror here too much to bear. Those familiar with Lucio Fulci will find themselves right at home. For UK cinemas, The House by the Cemetery was released under the old X certificate. Its 2 most gruesome scenes, attacks with a fireplace poker and kitchen knife respectively, considerably toned down. It was the very same version Vampix released on pre-cert video, later withdrawn and rebuked as a top 39 video nasty. Horror movies being prosecuted was one thing, but this was a version of a movie which had been given a seal of approval by the UK censor. And here it now was, pulled from the shelves and tainted as obscene. Later VHS releases rated 18 suffered a real blow, sometimes cut by over 6 minutes. The cuts reduced not only the violence and gore, but also scenes in which the young boy is chased around by a zombie in the basement. Not even the knife on the video cover was safe, quietly censored to remove all traces of blood smeared on its blade. The film has, in more recent times, been granted uncut status, released as such by distributors Arrow in 2009.
House on the Edge of the Park.
House on the Edge of the Park, much like Fight for Your Life, was a home invasion special refused a rating by the UK censor in 1981, but given a new lease of life in the early VHS free-for-all when it hit VHS stores, courtesy of distributors Skyline, completely uncut. Ruggiero Deodato of Cannibal Holocaust directs a video nasty get-together of familiar faces from The Last House on the Left, Cannibal Ferox, Tenebrae, and Absurd. Not quite as transgressive as his Amazonian bloodbath, this one sees a couple of hoodlums invited by happenstance to a high-class party, only to be belittled and humiliated by its hosts. The tables soon turn in horrific fashion, and it all ends on a silly but unexpected twist. House on the Edge of the Park was eventually approved for home viewing in 2002, missing almost 12 minutes of footage. The scenes of assault which got it banned back in the 80s were reduced to almost nothing. And, with the exception of a couple of C-words and the lead villain's excruciatingly slow-motion death scene, the movie was now barely worth an 18. It took until 2023, over 4 decades since its original ban, for the film to be finally restored to its original full-length glory.
I Spit on Your Grave.
I Spit on Your Grave, a keystone of B-movie exploitation, saw Camille Keaton, distantly related to legendary comedian Buster, fight back in unexpectedly gruesome fashion after a character is viciously assaulted by a quartet of local yobs. The attack scenes are prolonged and uncomfortable in a film unlikely to go down well at the average family soiree. Originally released stateside as Day of the Woman to lightweight response, the film was rebranded I Spit on Your Grave, with a juiced-up poster and ad campaigns guaranteed to pull in the crowds. What followed was a wave of success, scathing reviews, and censorship issues across the globe. Unsurprisingly, the film had not been submitted for cinemas in the UK, and would surely have been rejected outright if it had. Astra Video released it to VHS early on, fully uncut, with a new poster emblazoned on its front. The most common design had a cover completely coloured yellow. A rare alternative came with a purple border adorning its sleeve. Wizard Video also released a slipcase version, its hard cardboard cover often crudely cut down to fit a retail-sized box. I Spit on Your Grave became an absolute magnet for video nasty condemnation. Occasionally linked to real-life crimes in the tabloid press, the Astra Video was dutifully found to be obscene, along with the very same company's bedfellows, Snuff and Blood Feast. The BBFC did view the film in the early 80s during a brief period of voluntary submissions, but it barely got past first base given its content and troubles in court. Later videos and DVDs have all been censored, and the uncut version has, to this day, still not been approved as an 18 in the UK.
I spit on your grave.
Island of Death.
Island of Death, a Greek contribution to the Condemned 39, also known as Devils in Mykonos, had everything even the most demanding video nasty devotee could wish for. Fans of Shirley Valentine will recognise the locale, the catalogue of depravity which fills much of the running time as a pair of siblings kill a Greek island's inhabitants in a variety of ways. A can of paint, a bulldozer, and a goat take centre stage in a 70s obscurity sure to raise eyebrows even today. Island of Death was surprisingly granted a UK cinema certificate in 1976. Retitled A Craving for Lust, it was perhaps less surprisingly thoroughly cut to ribbons. The film's sex and violence was considerably toned down, but the antagonist's unhealthy appreciation for the local wildlife was left remarkably intact. "The lucky ones get their brains blown out" was AVI's delicate tagline of choice when they released Island of Death completely uncut to VHS. The colourful artwork bragged approved and passed by the BBFC X certificate, which was technically true of the movie itself, not so accurate when it came to the version contained on the tape. Since it restored every last glimpse of nastiness, the cinema version had completely stifled. The video soon disappeared, after the controversy waned. Hologram Video tried to get a censored version approved under the peculiar alter ego of Psychic Killer 2. The film was not a sequel, and contained precisely 0 psychics. But you didn't have to be clairvoyant to predict the 1987 re-release would be swiftly denied. In the modern world, Island of Death has now had all its sins forgiven, released totally uncut on both Blu-ray and DVD.
Was made from evil spinnings, like Jesus said.
The Last House on the Left.
The Last House on the Left, for even the most casual of true horror fans, needs little introduction. A cheaper than cheap favourite of 70s exploitation, way ahead of its time and still packing quite the punch. Conceived under the unmarketable working title of Sex Crime of the Century, it's a raw and dirty tale of two girls who find themselves off the beaten track and in the hands of a group of sadistic escaped convicts. A steady stream of humiliation, assault and wholesome slaughter ensues. Their deaths avenged by one girl's parents via the medium of booby traps, switchblade and chainsaw. The Last House on the Left, directed by young Wes Craven, was refused a UK cinema rating in 1974 and remained unavailable until the early 80s loophole saw it destined for VHS. Replay Video unleashed the movie with its violence intact but missing a silly inconsequential scene involving a truck full of chickens. Strangely, the film's roll call at the end was also missing its on-screen credits. As with Cannibal Ferox, they chose not to illustrate the front cover in order to avoid offence. The movie was still being banned by the BBFC as recently as 2002, but was given the all-clear in 2008, almost 4 decades since its original release. Rumours of a longer, more explicit version assembled around the time of its production will likely persist for many more decades to come.
Last House on the Left.
Love Camp 7.
Love Camp 7, a scuzzy 1969 cheapie and perhaps the first of its kind, sees a couple of undercover female operatives infiltrate the encampment of the title, only to endure all kinds of horror and humiliation at the hands of the SS. Directed by Lee Frost, whose debatable classics Hotspur and Zero In and Scream were both during different eras refused certificates in the UK, was an unsung auteur responsible for many an exploitation classic. With proud claims of "This is the film that goes beyond X." Two companies, Abbey and Market Video, released the movie during the pre-certificate era of video without so much as a trim. Love Camp 7 becomes more of a montage of softcore groping than the outright nastiness that would proliferate Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS. The more polished Diane Thorne classic still completely unavailable in the UK some 50 years later.
You may not find this story amusing. You may find it horrifying, disgusting. Certainly, you will not find it light entertainment. But we guarantee that you will not live long enough to ever forget the things you will witness and experience inside Love Camp 7.
Madhouse.
Madhouse, not to be confused with a handful of other movies bearing the same title, was a 1981 USA production. Mainstream and cultured by video nasty standards, directed by the same gentleman who would soon finish Piranha 2. Creepier and more effective than the decidedly fishy 1982 sequel, Madhouse sees a young teacher tormented by her twin sister who escapes from an asylum to wreak havoc, with a homicidal Rottweiler in tow. Knives and axes feature prominently, but the most contentious scene involves a remarkably fake-looking dog meeting its maker courtesy of a drill. Medusa, who released Absurd in much the same fashion, unleashed 2 versions of Madhouse on the unsuspecting public. One was fully uncut, the other, with minor artwork differences for collectors to routinely obsess over, was missing the moments gore enough to get the movie banned. Stylishly made and barely worthy of its video nasty status, Madhouse was released without cuts decades later in 2004.
Good boy.
Mardi Gras Massacre.
Mardi Gras Massacre, a movie whose quality can be determined from the opening sequence when crew members can be clearly seen reflected in its title card, was a 1978 take on that other video nasty Blood Feast. The backdrop now switched to Party Central in New Orleans. A well-dressed English gentleman, in search of the most evil girls he can find, invites contenders to his ramshackle sacrificial altar, where he ties them naked to a table and commits ritual murder. Gore effects look recycled from one death scene to the next, and as an added bonus, completely inappropriate disco music populates the soundtrack during every kill. Mardi Gras Massacre is awful, but it's a particularly kind of awful that Z movie exploitation fans will lap up and love. In 2022, a generation or two since the Video Nasties saga exploded, the movie was finally approved as an 18 uncut.
Mardi Gras Massacre.
Nightmares in a Damaged Brain.
Nightmares in a Damaged Brain was the glorious alternate title for Romano Scalavanini's Nightmare, a supremely seedy, unashamedly gruesome 1981 slasher which saw a mental patient pronounced cured and released from the asylum, only to immediately embark on a cold-blooded killing spree. Its obvious issues, and for the most part, lack of a mask, make this one hit harder than most of the mainstream 80s slashers. And it all ends on a graphic flashback that would make Lucio Fulci proud, predictably neutered and labelled as an X. World of Video 2000 released the pre-certificate video with plenty of gore restored, and a wonderful ad campaign where participants were invited to guess the weight of the brain. The video cover was magnificently gory, warning patrons of a nervous disposition to stay away. Sadly, the enthusiastic marketing doubtlessly contributed to getting this one banned. Many moons later, in 2002, a DVD was released, but sadly only contained the heavily cut version which had been given an R certificate in the States. Another 13 years, and finally, in 2015, Damaged Brain was allowed to roam free in the UK uncut.
The dream you can't escape. Alive.
Nightmares in a Damaged Brain.
Night of the Bloody Apes.
Night of the Bloody Apes does exactly what it says on the cover, except there's only one ape. And he's not really an ape, more of a man with ape makeup that ventures no further than down his neck. The story of an anguished father who tries to save his son's life via heart transplant involving a gorilla. This is a 1969 production which was already schlocky and dated by the time distributors IFS released it to the pre-searched VHS. UK cinemas got a heavily cut print in 1974, but the Video Nasty VHS was totally uncut, including, among other highlights, an incredibly fake eye gouging which looks like it was achieved with mashed potatoes. The video cover warned of scenes of extreme and explicit violence, which looked to be more of a come-on than a genuine plea for public caution. But this, combined with a couple of choice score effects on the back, were precisely the kind of marketing which helped instigate all the trouble. As of 2012, Night of the Bloody Apes has been fully uncut in the UK, with every last sequence of simian carnage restored.
The Night of the Bloody Apes.
Night of the Demon.
Night of the Demon, of no relation to the more upmarket 1957 British classic of the same name, was originally conceived as a standard monster movie filmed in the California woods. Copious amounts of blood were then added to juice up the gore and boost its appeal. The antagonist, a hairy but quite creepy Sasquatch stalking the usual posse of happy campers, pulls out one victim's intestines and uses them as a lasso. The 1980 film went nowhere near British cinemas, but the old video from IFS was completely uncut. Its cover bearing the same extreme and explicit violence warning which decorated Night of the Bloody Apes. It was released in the States unrated, and the gore contained in the video, though economical and gloopy, was still way beyond anything being approved under the X. IFS also released Pigs, Bloodsong, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 3 video nasty contenders not found to be obscene. Unfortunately, Night of the Demon was not so fortunate, disappearing from shelves and taking its extreme and explicit violence with it. Vipco released a massively cut 18 version on VHS in 1994, and in 2021, 88 Films managed to get it through the censor unscathed. Snuff. Snuff was pretty unique. It started out as an entirely ordinary Argentinian crime thriller known as The Slaughter. Filmed on an obvious shoestring, it told a story starkly similar to the Manson family murders, still relatively fresh news in 1971. After it quietly fizzled at the box office, the rights were bought by a new distributor who requested a new ending be filmed. The new footage, badly matched and awkwardly acted, showed a supposed number of the cast being killed as the camera rolls. The Slaughter was then retitled Snuff and projected in theatres to make good on its new title, complete with sham protesters outside. Pretty soon the film was making money and the fake protesters were no longer required since real ones started showing up at screenings. As ridiculously fake as the new ending was, all bright red syrup and rubbery fingers, this was marketing gold. The kind of bold step filmmakers just don't take anymore. Two videos surfaced in the pre-certificate era. One from Astra Video with the original poster artwork framed inside a blue border, and another which arguably perpetrated the legend with its anonymous video sticker and sleeve. Snuff disappeared from UK stores for over a decade, but was picked up by Blue Underground and certified without any cuts in 2003. Unfortunately, this release never materializes for reasons unknown.
The bloodiest thing that ever happened in front of a camera. Snuff.
SS Experiment Camp. SS Experiment Camp was the perfect example of a video nasty boasting a title and poster arguably more offensive than anything contained in the film. Sergio Garone's 1976 shocker follows a camp commandant's reign of terror during the final days of World War II. A romance between a female prisoner and a guard also develops, hampered by the commandant depriving his guard of a couple of possessions he certainly would rather keep. As with the Driller Killer and Cannibal Holocaust, SS Experiment Camp was all about the poster. Full-page spreads promoted a topless woman suspended upside down while an SS guard looms ominously behind, with promises of horrifying experiments in capital letters at the top. Go Video had a talent for VHS art no exploitation fan could possibly resist. But it was precisely this kind of image that kick-started the entire video nasty debate. SS Experiment Camp vacated stores as new VHS regulations took effect, and stayed that way until 2005 when it resurfaced as a DVD, remastered and fully uncut. Tenebrae. Tenebrae, one of the most bizarre additions to the official Video Nasties list. Seems far too good a film to have ever been included. From Italian maestro Dario Argento and widely regarded as one of his best, casual viewers may find Tenebrae to be one of his most accessible, even logical films. A killer is on the loose who stuffs pages from a popular novelist's latest book into the mouths of his unlucky victims. It all ends with a spectacularly messy arm severing, a landslider twist, and an ear-splitting scream which persists into the end credits. Tenebrae descended onto UK cinemas with only its arm-chopping moments slightly reduced. It was this same censored version that Video Media released to VHS, with moderately bloody but not offensive cover images front and back. For reasons unexplained, Tenebrae, in a version approved as suitable for viewing in theatres, was then trawled through the process and found to be obscene. The director's previous classics, Suspiria, Inferno and Deep Red, were all video nasty prospects, but Tenebrae, even in censored form, was the only one to trouble the dreaded 39. In 1999, Nouveau Pictures re-released Tenebrae on VHS as an 18, still missing some of the arm chop plus a bonus cut to the killer's death. Not even the cover art was safe, a blood trail over the girl's neck replaced with an unintentionally funny red bow. Only 4 years later, in 2003, the uncut version was released by Anchor Bay. The Werewolf and the Yeti. The Werewolf and the Yeti, also known as Night of the Howling Beast, was a 1975 Spanish horror, barely released in the UK, with sets that look like leftovers from Lost in Space. Paul Naschy, star of the lesser video nasty Blue Eyes of the Broken Doll, is accosted by cannibalistic ladies during a Yeti hunt in the Himalayas. They bite him, transforming him into a werewolf via a laughable dissolve effect, and instigate the most charming werewolf versus Yeti battle ever committed to film. Canon Video released it to VHS uncut, but it was never a particularly graphic film. The occasional moderately bloody dungeon scene about all the Werewolf and the Yeti has to offer. An American Werewolf in London has more gore per square yard than this one, and John Landis's 1981 classic posed nary a problem for either the Video Nasty List or the BBFC. The Werewolf and the Yeti remains one of the only a handful of top 39 titles which has never reappeared in the UK.
Action. Terror. In The Werewolf and the Yeti.
Zombie Flesh Eaters. Zombie Flesh Eaters winds down the list of top video nasties in spectacularly masterful fashion. A 1979 classic from Lucio Fulci, whose movies rarely escaped UK censors unscathed. Occasionally marketed as a follow-up to Dawn of the Dead, the plot spotlights Tisa Farrow, sister of Mia, in a tropical search for her missing father. Unbeknownst to her, he fell victim to a rare disease, which turns its infected into carnivorous zombies. The only known cure is a bullet straight to the head. Fulci gave the world a collection of gruesome zombie classics, and all four were deprived of their excesses upon release in the UK. Zombie Flesh Eaters was no different. Its famous eye-popping moment cut short before the offending wood splitter renders its screaming victim half-blind. During the pre-cert era, Vipco first released the censored cinema print to VHS, soon followed by an alternative proudly publicised as the strong and uncut version on the video sticker and front cover. No prizes for guessing which version was most popular, but both vanished from rental stores when the controversy picked up steam. Cut versions came and went throughout the years. Vipco re-released the theatrical version as an 18 on VHS in 1992. The cover stressed it was the original cinema version which has not been cut for home video use. This was technically true, but no mention was made of the fact the cinema version had previously been cut to shreds. In 1996, Zombieton, a charming compilation of B-movie horror clips, was trimmed due to its inclusion of gory footage from Fulci's 1979 classic. 3 years later, in 1999, Vipco released Zombie Flesh Eaters again, this time as an extreme version, which restored some but not all of the previously censored footage. In 2005, the movie was, at long last, approved completely uncut for home viewing, released to DVD by Anchor Bay as part of their Box of the Band. Years later, Arrow released a 2-disc special edition filled to the brim with blood-curdling extras.
Whatever it is, it makes the dead stand up and walk.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mary Whitehouse speaking. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say to you that your children and your family are very much at risk, particularly at this time, from video nasties, from media violence, from pornography, and even, could be, from cable television. So I've come to Peterborough to suggest to you that you ask your candidates whether they will vote for legislation which will effectively control these things, and especially for the sake of the children who are so much at risk. Thank you very much. From the video nasty, from media violence, and from pornography. And to suggest to you that you might like to ask your candidate.
That phrase, suitable for viewing in the home, comes from the Video Recordings Bill, often called the Video Nasties Bill, which is soon expected to pass into law. This is a private member's bill in the name of Graham Bright MP, which has had strong support from the government and from all the parties. But at the very moment it's likely to become law, there are growing criticisms of the bill. Its opponents are denouncing it as bringing in state censorship of an unprecedented kind, making us into the most censored country in the Western world. Later in the studio, we'll be hearing from supporters of the bill, opponents, teachers, parents, teenagers, and some producers of videos. But first, here's an open space report on the background.
EMI Video proudly presents films like The Deer Hunter, Death on the Nile, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
What a fabulous title.
Murder.
On the Orient Express.
Don't look now.
Convoy!
Where?
There they are.
Every day, video duplicating plants such as CBS Fox and Thorn EMI copy films onto thousands of cassettes. Britain is in the forefront of the video revolution. We have more video recorders per person than any other country in the world. More movies are now seen on video than in the cinema. But regulations which were designed for films don't apply to the new technology, which has created anxieties about controlling the new medium. In 1982, under the Obscene Publications Act, police seized 22,000 cassettes in the metropolitan area alone.
These are the cassettes, Driller, Killer and Death Trap, the first two of the so-called video nasties to be withdrawn from distribution. In a test case brought under the Obscene Publications Act, Willesden magistrates ordered their immediate forfeiture. In court, a solicitor for the Director of Public Prosecutions called the material an extravaganza of gory violence, capable of depraving and corrupting those who watched it. And there was a clear warning that though this case was not brought under Section 2 of the Act, which could have led to the distributors, VIPCO, being fined or even sent to prison, this should not be taken in any manner as a norm for the future.
For the DPP to go for seizure, when he knows quite as well as you know and I know that people that produce this kind of thing, that make huge fortunes out of this kind of thing, they couldn't care less about seizure.
The seizing of the tapes was the cue for a vigorous press campaign to ban these so-called nasties. Critics felt there was an overreaction amounting to a moral panic.
I think if I best sum it up by quoting you a very small news item that I spotted in the Daily Mirror. It was nothing to do with video nasties directly. It was about a very nasty attack on some ponies in the south of England. And at the end of telling this story, there was a quote from the Margate police in which they said that the attacker must have been influenced either by video nasties or a new moon. Now, I think that very nicely captures something about the way this whole issue's been presented, that actually that makes it sound very like witchcraft. And the way in which the whole campaign has presented itself has actually ascribed quite magical powers to flickering pictures on screens and how they hypnotize and then drug and then addict children.
Ever since the late 60s, there have been a growing number of campaigners against what they saw as the dangerous increase in permissiveness and the lowering of standards in society. Video nasties were a new battle in an old war.
The essence of a video is that it is shown in the home. And I'm afraid, you know, people who say, but why shouldn't adults be able to see this kind of thing in their own home? I'm half tempted to say that people who make that kind of demand, knowing that children are likely to see it, aren't really themselves very mature and adult. There are places where these people can go and see this material if they want it. But we're talking about material in the home. And there has now been tragic story after tragic story of the effect of this type of material on the children.
The moment you mention children, people actually stop asking questions and they have reactions instead. And I think what's happened is that people have become scared of asking the serious questions. You see, there is some serious research done on how do young people, and we're not really talking about children now, we're mainly talking about people in the age range 13 to 18. How do young people use video? And actually what it's found is that they use it to scare themselves. They actually quite consciously use it as a test of their courage. And I think that's a very different picture from the one with which we're presented when we have headlines, very melodramatic headlines that talk about rape of our children's minds, the corruption, the sadistic pleasure that people take in destroying the morality of the young and so on. Very melodramatic headlines have run all the way through the campaign.
Of course, we are talking about films that show in great detail mutilation, sadism, and this can come as a terrible shock, particularly to a young person. And of course, there are, as the law stands at present, any youngster of any age can go and hire or buy one of these things. And there have been a lot of instances where youngsters have pooled their pocket money to go and get one of these things to see whether they frighten them or not. And of course, it does have effect on youngsters, as indeed it has an effect on adults.
Unlike video, there are already restrictions on films shown in Britain. Cinemas have to be licensed by local authorities, who have the final say on what is shown in their area. But in practice, they usually follow the recommendations of the British Board of Film Censors. Although it has no statutory power, the board certificates recommending films as only suitable for certain ages are accepted by almost all authorities. In 1983, the video industry decided to set up its own voluntary system of classification. Videos without a certificate would not be distributed. But the scheme was never given a trial. The Conservative Election Manifesto had promised to legislate on the video issue, though the pledge was fulfilled in the form of a private member's bill.
First and foremost aim was the protection of youngsters. And so the path I took to do this was to ensure that all video films are given a category. In the same way as films are given a category, starting off with U and UC, which is especially for children, going through PG, parental guidance, 15-18. Now, by doing that, one is obviously telling the shopkeeper exactly what is in that video, and that ensures that the shopkeeper can have imposed on them, as the bill does, the liability not to sell to young people under age. So we're protecting them in the same way as you do from fireworks or alcohol.
I think you've got to distinguish the reasonable right of any parent to say, look, I don't actually want my children perhaps to have a nightmare or to see things which I don't think they're ready to see or to try to understand. That's fair enough. That's quite different from then spreading that into a generalized, these things should be outlawed and no one should ever be allowed to see them. There is a rising level of violence in society and people are worried by it. And it's very easy to create a shibboleth, to search out a new witch craze starts. And as with that quote I gave you at the beginning, it's very easy to look for something which actually has virtually no connection at all with what's going on and say, let's blame it on that.
The image the campaigners presented was of children having unrestricted access to horrific videos.
Traces of human skin scraped up the front of the car that might have been involved in a run. Sure, Dan.
Just as the video bill was to be debated in the Commons, new horror headlines greeted the publication of a controversial report which was produced by the so-called parliamentary group Video Inquiry.
A group of MPs of all parties and from both houses who have a concern with the family and the protection of children began meeting and discussing this, and they asked me if I would direct a piece of research to discover the facts about what children actually are seeing in the home that would enable Parliament to give a rational debate to this subject.
The report's claims gave academic credibility to the headlines and were not without influence in Parliament. The bill went through unopposed.
We discovered that 45% of children between the ages of 7 and 16 in schools throughout Britain have seen one or more of the so-called video nasties. That's films that have actually been prosecuted in a court of law and found obscene.
We've got something for you to do here. It's a questionnaire. Do you know what a questionnaire is?
No.
Can you guess what a questionnaire is?
Someone asks.
What do you think?
Where you ask questions.
Ask questions, that's right. That's why it's called a questionnaire. And on the top...
However much the report's claims about children's viewing were believed in Parliament and the press, much of the academic community greeted it with disbelief.
We've been trying to get video nasties for a long time, and they're very, very difficult to get hold of. And so it seemed extremely unlikely that 40% of children from the age of 6 years old could have seen a video nasty. The sheer availability of them would make that extremely unlikely, very implausible. And when we saw the questionnaires that were used by the Parliamentary Group Video Inquiry, it became very obvious what was likely to have gone wrong with the research. I mean, it isn't a good piece of research by a long shot, and in fact the questionnaire is very misleading for children. Questionnaires that are self-completed, in fact, are very difficult ones to produce, and it seemed what was happening is that children were very likely to have ticked off the titles of films that they liked the sound of, and not ones they'd actually seen.
Within the class, the children were told that this is not an examination and it wasn't a test of their knowledge in any way. They had to work individually and in silence, so they couldn't compare results. They had to, they were told rather that this was of great importance, and it was a privilege really for them to be taking part in this. They had to answer honestly, and there were numerous checks that we introduced on reliability, because obviously children are not very reliable as respondents in any piece of research, and so we designed our research to make sure that we did get reliable answers.
Titles of your 3 favourite films.
All right, that should be easy, shouldn't it?
3 favourite films.
To test the reliability of the report's methods, Dr. Cumberbatch modified the original questionnaire and tried it out with several groups of children.
That's how we went about trying to replicate the Parliamentary Group Video Inquiry research, by substituting in their questionnaire fictitious film titles. It's a normal psychologist ploy, really, to check on reliability of data. And what we do is we made up film titles, Blood on the Teeth of the Vampire and things of that kind, and substituted those for the actual video nasties titles in the Parliamentary Group Video Inquiry questionnaire. Now, when we gave that to school children, we found that 2/3 of them claimed they'd seen films which never exist.
What's the Hospital of Horrors like?
It's a bit scary.
What sort of film is it?
It's got a lot of blood in it.
A lot of blood.
I can't say much about it really.
I don't think that it's a valid test to give them fake titles. I think that is a dishonest way of carrying out a piece of research. I believe our method was much better, of trying to get honest answers rather than try to fool children into giving dishonest answers.
The reason we have been concerned is because huge claims have been made. They were all over the press. Huge headlines saying 40% of 6-year-olds are watching video nasties and being corrupted, and in 5 years we're going to have a time bomb of violence, all directly from their report. All those things are said in there. It had a tremendous role in pushing that bill through Parliament and in helping to stifle any worries that people might have had about it. All this influence for a report that, frankly, would not stand up to a first-year research essay by a student.
The Video Recordings Bill passed through the Commons with all-party support. The thousands of cassettes produced for sale or hire will become subject to stringent new restrictions. A powerful new censoring body is to be appointed by the Home Secretary.
What about my wife?
Thank you.
are they, Doctor?
I don't know. It all started about 3 months ago.
The censors will have the power to refuse certification or demand cuts in a video. Claims that the bill imposes state censorship are denied by its sponsors.
I don't know how they can deny it. It's very easy to play with words, you see, and say, oh no, of course we're just classifying films. You actually have to look at what will happen. According to secret guidelines, which will be issued by the Home Office, which can be amended at any time, and if they don't like the way they operate on the secret guidelines, they can sack the BBFC from doing so, and have said that if they don't like them, they will sack them from doing it. I have that recorded in the committee stage. So that's how it's going to operate. All films will be classified on that basis, under instruction from the Home Office. How can you call that anything other than state censorship?
The film industry, of course, has been subjected to the sort of categorisation I'm talking about, and have been also subject to the Obscene Publications Act. The two have worked side by side, but of course the videos is a new phenomena. What we've done is brought them very much in line with what is happening in the film industry. And we have, in fact, made lots of exemptions. People still think that everything is subject to this, but of course for things like sport or music recitals or anything that's aimed at education or medical stuff is exempt. It doesn't come in to the grips of my bill at all.
The bill has been designed to look at the special problem of people seeing films at home. Now, the use of the word home is very ambiguous for new legislation. If it means anything at all, it's a license to print money for lawyers. Because inevitably, the question will be, what is home? Does home, in fact, mean the Englishman's castle, where we have a greater freedom to do things than we can do on the streets? Or does home equal children? And of course, the moral campaigners will actually take this second definition and say, home equals children, and therefore films that are unsuitable for children should not be available for home entertainment.
The Evil Dead.
The sort of film which might no longer be available on video is Sam Raimi's cult horror film, The Evil Dead. Despite having an ex-film certificate, winning numerous awards, and being the most popular video of 1983, it was prosecuted earlier this year under the Obscene Publications Act. The film was acquitted by a jury 3 weeks ago, but the question remains, will the new video censors consider it suitable for viewing in the home?
If anyone can stand up and defend the sort of horrific scenes that I have had to see and other members of Parliament have had to see, I believe they're living in a different world to that world that I live in, and the world that I believe the majority of people live in. Those are unacceptable. I believe that research is taking place, and it will show that these films not only affect young people, but I believe they affect adults as well. It goes far too far. Now, the 18 category will still be pretty liberal, in fact more liberal than most countries in this world, in what goes into those videos. And I think there is no way that I or anyone else can really defend films that go into the sort of mutilation and show the sort of sadism and horror that the video nasty's shown. And of course we're only talking at present about 30 or so titles out of 6,000 or 7,000 titles, so it's a very small number of things we're talking about. And the vast majority of good entertainment will still be available on videos in the home.
I could feel myself agreeing and disagreeing all the way through that, and I bet that's what the people we've invited in the studio will be doing tonight as well. One of them is video journalist John Sanders, and it was he who first suggested Open Space do a programme on the video bill, because though there had been enormous media coverage of the so-called video nasties, there had been little scrutiny of the censorship powers of the bill. Now, George Sanders, you heard Graham Bright say, we are still going to be more liberal than many countries, and the vast majority of good entertainment will still be available for viewing in the home. So now what doubts have you still got?
Well, vast number of doubts. I don't think that the vast majority of movies will be available for seeing in the home, certainly not in the state in which they are at the moment. I can give you an example of a movie which depicts an SS officer who has his way with a prisoner and threatens to kill her children. Now, I'm not talking about a video nasty, I'm talking about Sophie's Choice. That movie has, at the moment, a 15 certificate, and that means that anyone under the age of 15 isn't allowed to view it in the cinema. Now, when we question, is that suitable for viewing in the home, we must say to ourselves, well, probably, if we define that, take that definition as in your program, that's for, that means young children shouldn't be allowed to watch it. Then we have to make cuts and alterations to that movie, just subtle ones, just slight ones, but in fact that would wreck that movie. And people would very quickly learn that movies on video, that's mature movies, are not worth watching. And that means that we'd be restricted to James Bond, we'd be restricted to cartoons, and the entire video industry would collapse.
Now, to do with good, lovely movies, and I want to know what mature means. This rather delightfully respectful of mature.
I would
not
call
worth watching if you cut something out.
I would say that. I no, I don't. I don't mean that at all.
Mature.
I mean a movie like Sophie's Choice. I'm afraid that you've been reading too many popular newspapers.
No, I'm just plowing through the bill in the House of Lords.
I was trying to avoid the word adult because it has connotations with movies.
The same sort of thing.
I don't mean that at all.
You know, the
I mean a movie like
Sanders is giving at the moment is that this bill is a product of the Mary Whitehouse, the Festival of Light, Mr. Hill. It's not at all. What brought it to our attention in the House of Commons was the NSPCC, who are horrified at what was happening to children. Cliff Hill's report, whether it's right or wrong, I don't really know, and I don't particularly care, didn't come out until it was halfway through. I think that should be made absolutely clear. We're not talking about state censorship, or no more state censorship, if we're being honest, than we've had since 1909 with the British Board of Film Censors. They have worked extremely well, and I feel that they work extremely well with video recordings in the home. Don't read things into the bill which aren't there.
Yes.
May I come in?
Yes.
I think right at the outset, John Sanders has failed to distinguish between what I think is an essential distinction if we're to understand this bill at all, and that is controls on the one hand which are necessary for the protection of the more susceptible members of society, such as our children, and censorship on the other. Now, you may be surprised to hear me say this sitting here, but nobody's more against censorship than I am.
But you were the person to actually, weren't you, help to draft that the phrase suitable for viewing in the home. And I find the word suitable, for instance, a very difficult one, I might say so. Suitable, what's suitable for you is not suitable for me. Isn't it a very movable feast, that word?
I entirely agree with you. May I tell you the history of this? Before the bill began its passage through either house, the draftsman had left the word simply as suitable for viewing. And like you, I could see no sense in that at all. So I suggested that the words in the home should be added, because it seemed to me that you had to provide the authority charged with this task of sifting out the real nasty with some sort of yardstick. And I don't think there's any difficulty in understanding what that means.
Mary, Mary Whitehouse, if I could say you're the queen of campaigners, and you've been well used to a lot of questions. May I put a very personal question to you? As a parent, would you have liked to been told that you were not responsible enough to choose for your children?
Oh, I shouldn't even have thought that that was the kind of question that could come out of the bill.
You would
if
not.
I was a parent today, and remember that the vast majority now of mothers are working during the daytime anyway, and they come home at night with work to do in the house and the rest of it. And if they're worrying about, and if I as a mother were worrying in the evening as to whether there were certain videos, or even more, if I didn't have them in my home, knowing that children would go out round the corner to their friends and so on and see them there. Mavis, could I just put a question to Martin, wherever he is? Have you got any children?
I have 2 children.
No, sorry.
No. Who are you talking about?
I'm talking the gentleman in the red who is on the film.
I certainly have children, yes.
You have children. Can I ask how old they are?
They're 9 and 13.
Yes. Now I want to ask another question. Would you let your children, and have you shown your children, some of the video nasties, the worst kind of video nasties that this bill deals with? Have you shown them to them?
I'm happy to answer that question, and I'll have to add something to it, though, in answering it.
Yes.
I feel personally quite ambivalent about showing them to my children. And I'll be honest about why, because I don't yet know in relation to individual films as to how they would respond to them.
Yeah,
I can use
exactly
an analogy.
what every other parent thinks.
Right, but that, you see, ducks an important question. Many parents look at their individual children and say, is my child ready to understand that kind of thing? For heaven's sake, there's a problem, for example, about at what age you explain to a child why he or she should be cautious with strangers. You encourage them from a very early age to be cautious with strangers. At what age you explain why is a real problem. What we are worried about is the creation of a huge system of censorship to cope with individual parents' problems of how they perceive their children.
But it isn't a huge system of censorship. It's a very, very limited one. Now, I'd like to ask you another question, if I may. Do you agree with the Race Relations Bill, which says that these things may not be said, may not be put on film? Do you agree with that bill?
I find that a very difficult question to answer because I don't
come
know
on,
the race...
yes or no, try.
Well, that's silly because I don't know the Race Relations Bill that well. That's a silly question.
You know what
We're
it's
talking about a
It's
bill that
about
I do know
controlling what people say, what people hear. Right? It has to do with censorship.
Well, Mrs. Whitehurst, you are confusing issues
I'm
here.
not. I'm raising the...
The question is that the legislation on racist attacks, on racist language in Britain, is geared specifically towards specific cases where language is racist. The Video Recordings Bill deals with all videos, every single video, not simply those that are produced for profit by large commercial concerns, but every video, whether those be produced by community groups, by campaign groups, by absolutely everybody. Now, this bill, according to the bill as it stands at present, has to be financially self-supporting in the censorship department. That means people will have to pay to get their films certificated. That's fine if you're Thorny MI. That's fine if you're a large multinational company. If, however, you're a youth club in Tower Hamlets who's produced a sex guidance film for youngsters, you've introduced programs, say, to do with the natural childbirth movement.
You will be covered in the bill if you read it.
Yes.
May I just say, I believe not.
I have rights. May I just clarify the one point?
Just 1 second, please.
On the point of censorship. The reason why I raised the Race Relation Bill is because the bogey of censorship is raised all the time about this bill. And I was just trying to clarify. You can't be in favour of censorship in one direction and be against it in another.
Simon Hughes, MP, you've been trying.
That's an invalid point, because you see, racialist words and racialist actions are judged by their effect in the legislation. They're words and actions likely to incite violence or a reaction. The problem with the bill as it is at the moment, although it had one very laudable and proper objective, which was to certificate, describe for people going into a video shop what it was they were picking up. We saw a bit in the film about two youngsters. It is right that they should know, just as when you go to the cinema you should know, what the category of product is. It's a Trades Description Act point. And the difference between this and the film industry is that the film industry is regulated by local authorities, elected representatives of the people, who actually decide, having considered what the British Board of Film Censors do first, what the people who elected them ought to be allowed to see. We don't have the same democratic accountability. It's actually a nominated body appointed by the Home Secretary, and there is no accountability at all. And that means that instead of somebody deputed to do the job by public consent, that isn't here, and it therefore takes away from the parent the right which they would otherwise be entitled to have done for them, have exercised for them by somebody they've elected to do that job.
The impact, the visual impact of seeing some of these horrific films. Now, in the House of Commons, we actually saw people eating live monkeys' brains. This is absolutely true. You may laugh.
Just a moment. Just a specialty in China.
I'm sure I haven't been there.
I've read about it.
Yes. And what's the difference, Mavis, for you reading about it in a book, perhaps seeing a picture in a book, but actually seeing it happen on a screen. Now imagine that further still in your own home, when the doors are locked. And what is happening, just a moment, what is happening at the moment, you're seeing that the video recording machine has taken the place of the baby minder. It has taken the place of the magician. And I'm afraid a lot of parents are acting irresponsible. Well, Martin there's wrestling with his conscience, deciding whether he's right or wrong, and whether it's going to affect his children or not. Heaven knows what damage is being done to him.
I think it's extremely significant that actually the thing that upsets you is people eating monkeys' brains, that you've designated a particular area of a problem. Now, when you ask that question about would you let your child view it, would you let your child view this particular thing, wouldn't it upset you? What you don't ask is the other question, which is, what about all the other things that they're watching on television? What about all the revolting, endless, routine representations of, no, listen, male aggression, of stereotypical families where women are treated absolutely appallingly in certain ways. Now, I'm saying, no, absolutely not put it in the bill. What you have designated is a particular area of problem which happens to correspond to a particular set of right-wing or political views about what is considered to be a problem for this society. Now, I think there are problems for this society, and that is the level of agreed, socially sanctioned male violence. Now, that for me is a problem, but you don't treat it by intervening with censorship, which is organised in a completely undemocratic way and which has very dangerous political implications, when what it's coming from is a particular designation of a particular set of concerns.
I think this is a real problem with the bill, and that is that any sort of constructive discussion about it is turned into, anybody who is opposed to the bill as it stands at the moment, is turned into a purveyor of porn who wants to corrupt children, etc. Now, many people supported the bill. As has been said, it had all party support to begin with. When Graham Bright moved it in the House, he said, look, this is a first draft, we'll have to try and sort it out to get it right. Very few changes have been made, and what we have ended up with is a bill which does far more than tackle the issue of video nasties. And Graham Bright is quite wrong on that film when he says that all that happened is that this bill does for videos what has already happened to film. Some examples have been given. Let me give you just one more. News. Now, news films have always been exempt from classification. I suppose because by the time stuff got classified, it would be olds, not news. Now, news videos, if they portray violence, etc., if they portray perhaps ships being blown up, etc., will not be exempt. Films produced by groups like the Natural Childbirth Trust will not be exempt because they will not, well, it is true, and they will not, well, perhaps people should read the bill more carefully, because we have in fact had the privilege of an organisation of discussing these points with David Mello, etc. Because such videos will not necessarily be produced by the medical profession. I think the argument about books is very interesting, because if you watch that film and you watch the kids going into the video shop, my mind was saying, that's a pity, because it's obviously going to be libraries next, because kids can walk into libraries.
I'm going to take the point of the young lady with the blonde hair. You don't mind being called a young lady. The bit about malaggression is quite right. I was talking to a couple of lads. I live in Hackney, right, Poisborough in the country, and all that business, but that's nothing to do with it too much. But the lads would go to a local church youth club, and I was talking to them about this because I was coming on telly and all that. And I spoke to one of them about a video film he'd seen. I'd call it a nasty, okay, whatever people call it. It was sexually explicit, and the poor young lady in it, although she probably wasn't poor, she earned a few bob out of it, she was attacked, etc. And he said, what's wrong with it? I said, what is wrong with it is when you go out and get married, if you do get married, would you then want to consider doing those things to your wife? He said, well, yeah, why not? Now, it's another isolated instance. OK, we're talking about the folk early on the film about, well, who's got all these figures bandied about? We get down to the brass tacks, folk working in Tower Hamlets and that, they must have heard of consequences like this. I mean, our local Radio Hackney Gazette, it's full of, well, not full of it, but every other week there's horrible stories in it. I don't care too much about all the parliamentary stuff. It's a little bit above me, believe me. And when it gets down to malaggression, I agree with you. But how do you deal with it? I hope you would be thankful if you were going to be attacked because someone was watching that sort of stuff, that at least there was something to help.
Yeah. But I agree with you in the designation of the problem. What I don't agree with is the kind of solution. I don't agree with how the bill is designating the problem. As far as the bill is concerned, the problem is just violence per se. I don't think violence is a problem per se. What I think is a problem about violence is the meanings that surround a particular act of violence. And it seems to me in this culture, the meanings that surround violence that we see are almost invariably meanings that say that this is a natural form of male behaviour.
Yeah.
However, I'm absolutely convinced by the arguments of the side opposing the bill that what this bill is doing is actually completely is introducing a form of censorship which is actually extremely dangerous. I don't think you tackle the problem of male violence in this way. You tackle it entirely differently. You tackle
Be
it
that right or wrong, might it be too late one time for, say, you, and I hope it isn't, but, you know, something's got to be done.
Well, this bill is not about male violence, incidentally.
No, but it helps.
Removing the jurisdiction for that. I mean, I don't think that anyone in this room would dispute the stories that you've told and this lady here. And inevitably, inevitably there are problems, and problems do arise. How do you solve them? And in my opinion, you don't solve them by removing that jurisdiction from a court of law, which is where it exists at the moment, and handing it over to petty bureaucrats
and
setting up a
under the
huge...
Obscene Publications Act, presumably.
Indeed.
Which has been shown to be an ass right through the years it's been in existence.
We've just seen evidence of 20,000 video cassettes.
I want to turn to a parent, Dave King at the back. I don't know your views on the bill, the censorship or not, but can I just put one thing to you first? All parents censor for their child as they're bringing them up. That's a natural thing, isn't it? Because you're trying to protect your child from... But, I mean, have you got any feeling that this responsibility that should be the parents mainly is being taken away from the parent?
Not at all.
No.
My position really is that I'm opposed to the freedom of parents to have access to any kind of video nasty and so on, because of a very graphic experience in my own home. We don't have a video recorder. We wouldn't have video nasties in the home. My son, spending a Saturday morning with a friend, indeed with two friends, finished up because of the inclement weather, I believe, in the lounge of his friend's home, watching that indescribably evil video, in my view, The Evil Dead. He came home, was unable to eat his meal. We attached no significance to that at all. He later went to bed, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was awakened out of a deep sleep to go into my boy's bedroom. He was in a crouched position with his hands between his knees, screaming, screeching in fact, a sickening sound, and took a great deal of time composing him. We eventually got through that night. The following night, bearing in mind he's 11 years old, almost 12 years old, he wet his bed. Now that was quite uncharacteristic. He sobbed, he had nightmares, he came into our room with pictures from The Evil Dead still passing before his mind. That's several weeks ago now, but even as recently as last week, I believe it was, something triggered the thought in his mind, once again, the awful picture and the words. Now, I'm not a left or right wing. In fact, I'm just middle of the road politically. But I feel very, very strongly about the freedom of other parents to show our children these things. We wouldn't have them, but I've no control over other parents.
When I was little, what did that to me, that happened to me, was Strull Peter, you know, the children's picture book. I mean, that kind of thing, which is an extreme case, doesn't really worry me. I mean, what I'm worried about for children, if they have any, is the kind of everyday thing that they'll see. The Starsky and Hutches, the ordinary action film that show men beating each other up, which show men being aggressive. I'm worried about, if it's a daughter, say, the kind of advertising, the kind of way that she will see women are meant to act because of the advertising. Now, that worries me far more than any one extreme piece of horror that they might come up against. But that's a matter of changing society's attitudes, not a matter of saying, no, you can't have this, no, you can't buy that.
In fact...
And in changing society's attitudes, that's very much, it can't be done by a secret censorship process. It's got to be done by public debate.
But you see, I think what's happened is that the people who are against this bill have got themselves all tied up with this academic approach to the word censorship, the dirtiest word in the English language. If we thought about people, not ideas so much, but people.
Why don't you think
Cathy Myers.
Thought about those
Can we reply on the Obscene Publications Act?
We're still waiting for...
All right, Cathy, 1 second. Obscene Publications
You see,
Act.
what worries me is that Mary Whitehouse, having lost a series of cases, immediately declares a law wrong. Let's take an example of a case where she...
1 second, Mary.
Excuse me, Mary. You threw a lot of questions at me. I'm going to put one back to you in a moment.
Go on.
One of the cases she lost, and let's take it as an interesting case of a thing that would, I'm certain, be refused certification, was a very serious film dealing how male aggression is produced. It was a film called Scum. It was a film about the effects of Borstal on its inmates, a very serious film, which happens to use violence in order to show its message. Excuse me, Mary.
Well,
Don't interrupt, because I didn't interrupt you.
Well, this will have to be cut, because the IBA is appealing. The thing has gone to appeal, and we cannot discuss Scum on this
We can
programme.
discuss the film, because the film is the
Well, I
kind
had
of
nothing
film
to do
that
with
will
the
be
film,
refused certification under the bill, because it happens to use violence in order to convey a message. The fact is, yes, it does show gross violence. It actually shows an act of buggery in a small boy and an institution because of the way I want to be able to use violence in a film if it is used to make an important message about how people are made violent. I beg your pardon?
Will it help 5-year-old children to see this?
It will help a lot of people
You want
learn...
them to see this?
What a silly question.
No.
I don't want them to see
Then why
Tom
not
and Jerry.
support this
Because there are other
very
ways...
simple bill to deal with
Excuse
that horrible issue?
Because that film has a lot of value other than what a 5-year-old might get out of it.
And so you
And
want
because
them to
you
see it
want
on
to
video.
twist everything back to this cartoon image of a child...
It's video, it's
I'm
not the
sorry,
cinema.
it's a cartoon image of a child which you throw at us and then try to drag everything, including the obscene publications, into line around this image of a
Those
child.
who work with children
Please
every
don't.
day don't
You know,
can't
the-
have
and
cartoon
what I
pictures of
find
kids.
interesting is that we have listened very patiently to the arguments put by those who support the bill. As soon as we try to reply, actually a great deal of heckling comes in because we actually have a more complex case to put. The fact is that violence per se is neither good nor bad. It is the use to which it's put, it is the context in which it's seen, and home is not necessarily the worst context in which to see
every
violence.
5-year-old's mind.
Therefore, I'm making a case that the Obscene Publications Act is only seen as a problem because actually a large number of cases have been lost by the moral majority campaigners in this country.
We've gone way off beam with this, and I'll tell you why we've gone way off beam, if I may. It's just the sort of difficulties that happened in Parliament. I mean, I like Mary Whitehouse. I think she tries to do things which she considers to be right. A lot of them I just don't agree with.
This is BBC North. Time now for this week's edition of Close Up North, which examines the problem of video nasties. Some parents may think this programme is unsuitable for children.
One Conservative MP says they amount to an attack upon our moral fabric and could be one factor behind the rising crime rate. He's referring to the so-called video nasties, videos that are sexually explicit or depict acts of extreme violence, often against women. Trading standards officers are now attempting to smash the underground network that distributes such material. Later in the programme, I'll be asking my studio guests whether such material does corrupt society. But first, Kathy Killick looks at attempts to halt what seems to be an explosion in video nasties.
If people don't want to watch it, don't have to, do they? If they can just, there's an off switch on the TV, they just switch it off, can't they? And if you watch half of the films, you know what I mean? You can tell it's all that fake, it's just funny.
A lot of women who came to the refuges in West Yorkshire complained that men got videos, put them on the telly, and then made the women do the things they saw in the videos.
Seeing them doing a hand boogie is making her feel very itchy.
Pornography, yeah, there's a lot of that floating about, but you can get that anywhere. You can walk into the pub and buy it off anyone in the pub, can't you?
Early morning in Hull and the overnight ferry from Rotterdam docks. The ship is a busy link with a country renowned for its liberal attitude to pornography. In the arrivals hall, customs have a very visible presence. Behind the scenes, there's a covert operation aimed at those importing explicit or violent material. Many passengers are routinely questioned.
Did you get this beer on the ship or on the ship?
So when was the last time you were over there?
2.5 years ago.
Do you have any cigarettes, tobacco? No.
Customs officials mount frequent spot checks, but with the vast quantity of freight passing between the continent and Britain, the war against the video smugglers seems formidable.
Do you have any? Do you have any hash? Any drugs? Yes. Yes. For you?
Whoa.
Yeah. No?
It's in a 40-foot container or even in a cab of a lorry. You can imagine there is a fair amount of space. And people are fairly crafty in the ways that they try and bring it into the country. The simple fact that they can just take it and have it on the spool as opposed to the video cassette itself. So, you know, there's all sorts of ways and means. And to take it down from a video cassette to a spool, you know, and you can hide that virtually anywhere.
Bagged up and ready for presentation in court, some of the drugs seized in Hull. In another corner, some of the explicit and illegal videos.
You have a video and that can be copied no end of times, although the quality does go down somewhat, but you've still got that very saleable commodity.
Despite the efforts of customs officers, it is inevitable that smuggled goods do get through. Once in this country, the video nasties are copied and sold. It's now down to trading standards officials to investigate this seedy business.
Next again is Dragon Fight, which is a black and white photocopied sleeve again.
Last week, in an operation coordinated by Lancashire Trading Standards, 3,000 films were seized in raids across the country.
The films are getting more horrific and more sexual day by day, and the more you feed people, you corrupt them and entice them to want something more hard, in a sense, so therefore they meet the demand by producing most horrific films.
Cashing in on that demand is simple. Banned films are sold through classified ads. It's here a trading standards officer on Humberside starts his investigation.
Hello?
Hi, I'm looking about your advert for adult videos.
Yes, love.
Can I arrange to get some? What sort you got?
Well, there's a hard pornos, not these you get in the video shops.
Hard pornos, not video shop ones?
No.
Right.
He sets up the sting. For it to work, he must be sold an uncensored or unclassified video.
Films on one.
Right.
So it's a 3-hour tape, £10 each or 4 for that. Tomorrow we're on a special offer at the moment.
I'll take just one to start off with.
Yeah.
Can I get one this afternoon?
Of course you can. Do you know the Hull Infirmary?
Yeah.
Well, it's straight opposite, and there's a telephone box on the corner.
Yeah.
I can meet you there, love. What time?
If we say, what, 2:45?
2:45? Yeah, I'll have a white coat on, love.
Right, woman in a white coat.
Yeah, long white coat and it'll be in the camera.
What sort of video is it?
There's a whipping one.
Yeah.
With blocks whipping a woman and it's two women together and she's whipping her and all that. So if you're not happy, we always swap them.
Right.
Any complaints, you know. I mean, we like to keep our customers happy.
Cheers. It's got no title.
There's no at all?
No. Start. No. Start.
Twice now, trading standards officials have bought pornographic films through this single ad. The case seems clear-cut.
They're obviously doing it as a means to make money. The lady today made £10. Her husband yesterday made £30. Probably a search warrant will be obtained for the house and a visit will be made to the premises where the person who sold me the video lives, with a view to inspecting and seizing any videos that they have.
One avid collector of horror videos is Nathan Stansfield. Over the past year, he's spent around £1,000, much of it on films that have been banned. It was an interest sparked by the cult horror magazines.
Just self-addressed off to one of the adverts in the back of the magazine who sent me a list, and it had a big list of like, all horror films and all sorts. So I sent off for a few. And I, got Texas Chainsaw Massacre and that. I couldn't see why it was banned, because there's no blood or anything in it at all. It's just, you know what I mean, banning something like that is stupid, because half the stuff on a 15 certificate is worse than that.
New Flowers today marked painful memories of the Bulger trial.
That case refocused attention on the effect violent videos could have on some youngsters.
The children had watched cartoons in this video shop straight after the killing. A month before, John Venable's father had rented Child's Play 3, a mainstream 18-rated black comedy showing a demonic doll being battered to death. The Bulger trial judge surprised the police investigating the case when he suggested violent videos may have played a part in the case.
That link has been fiercely disputed, but a number of psychologists believe that watching violent or explicit videos could mould certain patterns of behaviour.
Whenever we watch a video, we interpret it, and no two people interpret it in exactly the same way. So two children watching a video nasty would interpret it differently. One child might feel so scared about it that the child becomes more frightened of life, more frightened of the world, and the other child might see it as permission to carry out in real life all the aggressive fantasies that he has.
Don't believe me, son. You always see in the papers about it, but it's never been proved though, has it? That, like, violence in a film, like, well, violence in, like, some person's going to go out and do, it's never been connected, has it?
I think it's obvious that what we see on screens affects our behaviour. If adverts had no effect, then companies would not be spending millions a year on adverts. And if adverts have an effect on behaviour, I think we can conclude that what goes on between the adverts has an effect on behaviour, or any other video shown.
These videos were seized from a market trader in Barnsley, along with counterfeits of the Disney classics, were extremely violent and explicit films.
Good afternoon, Trading Standards.
Officials operate a telephone hotline for people with information about those involved in manufacturing fake merchandise.
Horror and pornographic, right.
The evidence indicates that the criminals involved in counterfeiting are now racketeering in video nasties.
Product counterfeiting is a major industry in itself. It costs the nation billions of pounds every year, and there's no sign of that subsiding. But what's causing us particular concern these days is the growing incidence of pornographic and violent videos being part of the haul of counterfeits.
To protect society from the extremes of the video makers, new laws came into being. But some argue banning films has fostered the illicit trade. Others say the law is not working.
The Video Nasty Bill, as it was affectionately called, just purely categorised videos so that parents going to a shop knew exactly what they were taking home and knew that their responsibility was to keep it out of the way of children. Sadly, they've got very lax, and if you tell children this is forbidden, it makes it much more acceptable for them to try and get hold of it when parents go out and perhaps when there's a child minder there.
Well, I think it's because most of them are banned. That's why they're... Because if something like that wasn't all banned, they'd have all disappeared. You wouldn't even be hearing the names of the films now. No one would be interested in them. I think it's because they're all banned and that, and people want to see what they're like.
The horror cult, with its images of physical and sexual violence, has centred around a number of obscure magazines and fanzines. But the electronic revolution is set to change that. Although it's banned here, the porn channel Red Hot Television is seen by viewers who've been able to obtain illegal decoders. Computers can generate scenes of extreme violence. As technology develops and violence and pornography exploit new media, there are those who believe it will challenge the very fabric of society.
They're undermining society, and we're so slow to take this up. I've been saying it for years over in the House of Commons. We are undermining society, and we're producing a nation of petty criminals and criminals, and yet people aren't thinking about this carefully enough. It's very serious indeed. There's got to be a stop.
I just think they should, like, bring a new certificate in or something, or like limited purchase to like credit cards so only adults can go out and buy them.
If we really cared about ourselves and how we bring up our children, we would be asking, why do we need these kind of things? Why do we let terrible cruelties go on in other countries, like in Bosnia? You know, why don't we question ourselves and see if we can change?
There are those who say the video nasty industry is causing irreparable damage to our communities. Those campaigners say time is rapidly running out.
Right, well, first of all, can I turn to Michael Allison in London? How prevalent is this kind of thing? Can we get it in some kind of perspective? Is this just a small minority, or is it a growing habit among quite a few?
I think it's probably difficult to give an absolutely categorical set of statistics, but I think that there's no doubt that it is growing, and it is such a serious, so to speak, disease or virus in society that however small the element is at present, and however big it should be nipped in the bud.
John Griffiths, you're at the coalface, if you like. How serious do you think it is? How many people are we talking about here?
It's impossible to judge how many there are. Certainly, it seems to be becoming more prevalent at this moment of time. Whether that's because the media are putting more interest into it is difficult to say. But certainly we're finding more cases, and whenever we carry out raids, we invariably find video nasties, hardcore porn, and horror videos.
Right. Well, let's look at the debate that's raging about these videos at the moment and examine something Dorothy Rowe brought up in the film, Why? Why do we need them? David Webb.
We need them because we live in a supposedly free society. And in a free society, the kingpin of that is freedom of expression. This country is an originating signatory to the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19,
if I can
freedom of
interrupt
expression.
we're coming to that later.
Sorry. And it is also a signatory to the European Convention on Human Rights, Article 10, freedom of expression. This is part and parcel of an adult's right to see, read, or hear whatever he or she chooses for him or herself. We are the only country in the Western world that has this draconian censorship, and it's a disgrace to this country, and it should have been changed years ago.
I would like to talk about censorship at length later. Could you tell us at the moment why you think human beings need video nasties?
Yes, there is, whether we like it, and however unpalatable this may be, there is a latent streak of violence in us all, and it is recognized as being hugely cathartic. Some people need this more than others. Hugely cathartic for people to live out their fantasies and their horrors, whether they be joyous or horrendous, through watching films, seeing television plays, or watching videos. So from that point of view, that is one reason that I would put forward. But in any case, it's a question of freedom of choice. Some people like watching Beethoven's Fifth Symphony on the television. Some people like watching a horror movie. And as consenting adults, we should stop having this state nannyism, and we should be allowed to choose for ourselves.
Do you think it's a good thing to see, for example, violence and the mutilation of women?
It's neither good nor bad, but you see, if you can't,
do you watch them, for example?
No, I don't. I'm not particularly interested in them, but I would champion the right to people to watch films.
So you haven't seen them?
Of that genre? Yes, I've seen some. Of course, I have of that genre, if they so wish. And I think, if I may say so, that the nonsense that is talked, that anything that anybody sees on a television screen, or a video film on a television screen or a cinema screen, they automatically and compulsively go out and replicate it, copy it, imitate it. That may be the advertising world's pipe dream, but it is in reality a myth. It is a nonsense.
What would you say to that?
Well, first thing I like to say is this is very gendered. And the gendered aspect of this so often gets lost. Women and men actually don't agree about this. Of course, some women do watch video nasties, I'm sure, and some men don't. But it's a very gendered issue, and the gendered aspect of it has not had sufficient discussion.
Would you like to tell us exactly what you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is that women really have a very different understanding about violence than men do. And I've spent years interviewing women about violence against women. We have some access to interviews in relation to men about how they understand violence. Men and women actually don't share the same views, and this is partly because of the way masculinity is constructed and the way femininity is constructed.
The violence is usually against women in these kind of films.
That's right, and it's men who are violent and women who are the recipients of violence and so on. But the video actually introduces yet another subject, and that's the one of age. You see, who brings the video into the house and who watches it? And it's all very well to talk about this is a matter of choice. In fact, very often in homes there are captive audiences who have not chosen to watch that. There is one television set, one front room, one lounge, and the video goes on, and anybody who's in that space watches it.
But for those people who are consenting adults, is there anything wrong in eroticism? That's healthy.
Oh, no, I don't think there's anything wrong in eroticism at all, and I don't think there's anything wrong with sexuality. But I think there is the kind of question mark around violence. But I do think we can't just... I think we should lose these terms, consenting adults, and talk about men, and talk about women, and talk about children. And who has consented to watch what, and who is there because it's in their front room and they really don't have a lot of choice about it.
What sort of effect does it have, do you think, on men who are watching? There's a huge debate going on at the moment about whether or not men who watch a lot of these kind of violent acts against women on video go out and do the same thing. Do you think there's anything in that?
Well, I think... Usually the answer to that is probably no, they don't. But there is a small group, of course, who do. And if you talk to the people who work with sex offenders and violent offenders, you will find that videos, visual material has played a role often in the kinds of crimes which they've committed. Now, admittedly, this is a very small... Well, it's a very, very small number we're talking about. But of course, it does happen. That obviously isn't the impact on most people.
David Webb, what would you say about that, though? That some people interviewed by psychologists, people who've been convicted rapists, say they have been influenced by watching video nasties.
Well, we're all influenced by everything we see in life. It contributes to, making us what we are. No one's denying that. But it's only a tiny part of the multitude of influences that go to contribute towards the sort of characters and people we
How far down the line would you go, though? Would you allow snuff videos? Would you allow...
No, of course not. But there are plenty of laws to take care of the making of snuff videos. It's a criminal offence to cause them. I mean, since you've mentioned it, snuff videos, there has never been put forward a piece of evidence of a real snuff movie.
No, I was just finding out how far you would go if there were.
It is a wonderful device that these pro-censorship fanatics, like Michael Allison, who, of course, he represents the Godbothers. He represents the Godbothers. He's one of the Church of England commissioners, and it's his slot he's fighting for. And he's not saying, as he should, as an MP should, look, for people to be free to choose for themselves, and he belongs to a party, then that's supposed to be the cornerstone of their philosophy.
Let Michael Allison answer that, and also let's have his comment about whether or not he thinks that video nasties actually affect people's behaviour.
Well, I've enjoyed the dialogue so far. I've really been put on the spot, as I'm not quite certain what I would call a God spotter or something like that.
No, God botherer, not a God follower.
All right, Mr. Webb. Mr. Allison.
I couldn't quite get it. God came into it, and I'm very happy that God should come into it. But I think that I would like to slightly reduce the temperature. I'm not at all a pro-censorship person, but I think one has to keep a reasonable perspective here. There are acceptable laws on our statute book for regulating how people behave and what they do. We regulate and disallow the sale and wide circulation of drugs. We definitely have laws on obscenity for the publication of pornographic material.
Mr. Webb, just a moment. Mr. Webb, you've had quite a long time. Mr. Allison, can I bring you back to this point about whether or not you think there is a connection between watching video nasties and people going out and doing similar things, committing rapes and violence?
Yes, I would have said that there is enough evidence. I'm not sure that you could say it's absolutely decisive and 100% sure, but there's enough evidence that there is a link between what some people see and learn and get initiated into in their imagination by viewing television or viewing video nasties, and they're then going out to enact physically, very often against women or children, and children between children, what they have seen, to mean that it is necessary for reasonable people to agree that the benefit of the doubt, and if there is a doubt, give the benefit of the doubt to the victims, to the potential victims, be they children or vulnerable women, if there's any doubt at all, give the benefit of the doubt to the possible victims.
Mr. Webb, is it not the case that it's the message that's coming over that matters? It's not really a genitalia count, but the message is that this is violent to women, this is sometimes violent to children, and even if we're talking about something which is purely erotic, it's not the amount of genitalia, it's whether or not the message coming over is one of violence. Don't you think that that is the heart of the matter?
Well, can I just take up this point about it's violent to women? I resent the feminist factions always saying that this is pornography equals violence against women.
A lot of it is, though. Some of the videos...
I've never heard of anything so stupid in my life. Violence is violence is violence. No one's condoning that.
In these videos, Mr. Webb, it's usually committed against women.
In any case, depict violence against men and women very often. So, I mean, that argument is not as... What Jalna's really saying is that I don't like men. I don't like the dominance that men have in this society, and let's use everything we know, everything in the book, every device to try and do something about that. And poor old pornography is the scapegoat for all of society's ills, and that's what these MPs. I sat in the House of Commons last Tuesday at the Standing Committee of the Public Order and Criminal Justice Bill.
Judith, what would you say to that?
Well, I really don't think if one objects to violence against women that one necessarily makes the connection that one hates men. I really think that is a misrepresentation, and quite a serious one. We actually have to take violence against women and children seriously. We have to take the representation of violence against women and children seriously, and against men, and against other groups, because some of this is aimed at particular groups, like black groups or people who live in other parts of the country.
And just a moment, Mr. Webb. Have you seen this material?
Yes. I have seen some of it. I wouldn't say I'm not an expert. I haven't watched everything, but I've seen some of it. And some of it is aimed at other forms of dominance and submission, which is to do with countries of the North, countries of the South, racial groups, and so on.
Some people like being dominated, and some people like to submit, and they should be free to do that and express it on film or video if they so want
to. Mr. Webb, could we just be polite enough to let Jalna finish what she's saying?
Now, the thing about it is that while this is true, some people do like to be dominant, and they like other people to submit, and it's usually more often that way than it is the other way around. What is actually happening is a lot of people are being caught up in this who actually aren't very interested in either of those two things. So, for example, if one asks people about their experiences, has anyone ever asked you to do anything which they've seen in a video nasty or pornographic film or whatever, a significant proportion of women will say yes. By significant, I mean maybe 10%, maybe a bit more, something of that kind. And in terms of the number of children, and obviously you showed the Bulger case earlier, children caught in the front room having to watch films, this is also a very large percentage. I don't know what it is, but once again we're in the same position. So it's not about choice, and I think this really has to be knocked on the head quite firmly.
Right. Can I move now to what we might do about it, if anything? I know Mr. Webb thinks nothing, but John Griffiths, you, as I said before, at the coalface, what would you do now? Have you enough powers, do you think, or would you like more, tightening up of legislation?
The powers we actually have are quite good. On occasions, we have to take action using additional powers, but because we are a department that has a lot of resources in the way of legislation at our disposal, we can usually get the matter before the courts and get sentences through ways and means.
Should it be you who's doing it? Some people have said it should really be the police or somebody with a bit more of a strong arm.
Well, we have a very strong arm, and we work very closely with the police on all these matters. One of the snags that there is under the Obscene Publications Act, you have to define what is obscene. That is very difficult, and really that is one of the cruxes of the matter. That has to be defined clearly.
Right.
As a result of that, the matter falls under the Video Recordings Act, which we're responsible for enforcing.
Right, Mr. Allison, Member of Parliament, what would you do about it, and what are you trying to do?
Well, I think we have got to face the problem which came to the fore with the Bulger case and the evidence that a lot of material in a video form, which is definitely categorized and specified as not being suitable for children under 18 or under 15 for that matter, is being taken into the home and for whatever reason in the home is being viewed and seen by children for whom it's not meant to be viewed and seen by definition of the certificate.
But are you sure that censorship is the answer? Because in the past, historically, it hasn't been thinking of prohibition, thinking about the drugs case and so on.
No, I'm not talking about censorship. I'm talking about making effective the existing British Board of Film Centre certification, so that if films are likely to be taken into the home in video form, then it should bear a new designation or category which is unsuitable for home viewing. That doesn't mean to say it can't be seen. But would that do any good at all? It doesn't mean to say it can't be seen in a cinema or in a cinema club. But if it bears the category unsuitable for home viewing, it means that children might possibly see it and suffer serious damage psychologically or mentally as a result of that. That would mean that the ineffectiveness of certification for videos which might be taken into the home would be upheld.
I'm going to have to stop you there, I'm afraid, Mr. Alston. We're out of time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Join us once again for Close Up North next week. Good evening.
Video nasties, the Home Secretary says he won't change the law to ban them altogether. The Home Secretary, Michael Howard, has said he will look closely at a report which says there is a link between violent videos and crime. But he said it would be an extreme step to ban the videos simply on the grounds that they were unsuitable for youngsters. More than 200 MPs say he should.
It looks as if films like these will stay on shop shelves, despite the claims by child psychologists that youngsters can act violently after watching so-called video nasties. Today, the Home Secretary suggested he would not be accepting an amendment to the Criminal Justice Bill up for debate in mid-April, which would take the videos out of circulation. He stressed the role of parents instead.
Well, parents do have a responsibility. There are some videos which are suitable for viewing by adults, not suitable for viewing by children. And it's difficult. It would be an extreme step to ban all videos that might be perfectly okay for adults to watch.
Films without certificates, or ones that are only allowed to be shown in cinemas, have been seized on video by police and trading standards officers. But there's resistance to extending their powers from those who say the psychologist's report proves nothing.
We do not accept that there is a conclusive argument that the problems in our society can be simply cured by preventing the majority of households in the United Kingdom from being able to see 15 and 18 classified programmes.
MPs demanding a change in the law have had their resolve to get it strengthened. Many are conservative. In their way is the fine print. How do you write legislation that stops certain violent videos reaching the shops while leaving others, including Oscar winners, unaffected? Jeremy Vine, BBC News.
It's a video nasty! It's a carpet farty!